Hi, I'm Elara Vance. For 5 years, I lived in the basement lab my family mocked. They called it my hobby. They called it my dark little space. I called it my universe. Every waking hour, every late night, every forgotten meal, it all went into that lab. My hands were stained with circuit board dust. My hair often smelled of ozone, and my clothes usually had a faint chemical tang. I didn't care. The hum of the servers, the glow of the monitors, the endless lines of code and equations. That was my comfort. My truth? I wasn't allowed to bring my work upstairs. The family dining room was a pristine, polished world of cut crystal and hushed tones. It was where important Vances discussed important Vance things. Things like stock prices, mergers, and the latest gossip from the country club. My quantum stability research had no place there. It was too messy, too abstract, too much like me. Then came that Sunday dinner, the one I'll never forget, the one that changed everything. Dad, perfectly composed in his tailored suit, slid papers across the mahogany table. They were crisp, official-looking documents. My stomach tightened. I knew somehow before he even spoke that these papers concerned me. They always did when they appeared unannounced at dinner. He never looked at me directly. He never had. He just looked at the papers as if they were a more interesting conversation partner. He spoke in that smooth corporate voice he used when he was about to deliver bad news disguised as a logical business decision. He said they were cutting losses. He said they were streamlining. What he really meant was they were selling my life's work, my passion, my very soul. It felt like they were selling it for scraps. Just like that. Between the roast beef and the creme brulee. That's when everything changed. The air in the Vance dining room was always thick with the scent of expensive food and unspoken expectations. That night, it was roast lamb, perfectly carved, sitting on a silver platter. The crystal chandelier glittered, casting a cold, elegant light over the polished mahogany table. Outside, the early autumn evening was drawing in, but inside the room was bright, almost unnaturally so. Every piece of silver gleamed. Every napkin was folded just so. I sat at my usual spot near the end of the table, close enough to be included, but far enough to be easily ignored. I wore a simple black dress, the kind Mom approved of for formal family dinners. It felt stiff and uncomfortable. I always felt stiff and uncomfortable in that room. My laptop bag, my constant companion, was on the floor beside my chair. Its weight, a familiar comfort against my leg. It held not just my laptop, but my backup drives, my research notes, everything. My entire world contained in a worn leather bag. Dad, at the head of the table, swirled the dark red wine in his glass. He was a man who moved with deliberate grace. Even when performing the simplest actions, his eyes, usually sharp and assessing, seemed to drift over me without truly landing. He took a sip, then cleared his throat. It was a small sound, but it always commanded attention. "Elara," he began, his voice calm. almost detached. Your mother and I, and of course, Clarissa, have been discussing the arrangements regarding your project. My fork clattered against my plate. I tried to steady my hand. Project. He called it a project. 5 years of intense, relentless work, day and night, powered by pure scientific curiosity and the desperate need to prove myself. A project. We've decided it's time to cut our losses, he continued as if discussing a failing stock option. Not my life's ambition. Vance Industries has had an offer. A very fair offer considering the experimental nature of the work. My gaze darted to Mom. She sat opposite Dad. Her posture perfect. A slight, almost imperceptible nod of agreement. Her expression was serene, completely unbothered. She was wearing pearls as always. They looked like tiny frozen tears. Then Dad dropped the bomb. Global Tech is acquiring your quantum stability research. $2 million. $2 million. My heart hammered against my ribs. $2 million for 5 years of my life. For a breakthrough that I knew deep in my bones could change the world. It was a pittance. An insult. It was less than what Vance Industries spent on their annual Christmas party. My older sister, Clarissa, let out a delicate, high-pitched laugh from her seat beside me. She was impeccably dressed as always, her blonde hair styled into perfect waves. Her eyes, which were usually fixed on her phone or her reflection, were now fixed on me, glittering with a familiar, cruel amusement. Honestly, Elara, she drawled, her voice dripping with condescension. It's probably more than it's worth. Those basement projects of yours have been an embarrassment to the family for years. People ask. They wonder why you're not contributing to the real company. She took a delicate bite of her lamb, chewing slowly, savoring the moment. My face felt hot. An embarrassment. That was their word for everything I cared about. My passion, my dedication, my intelligence, all reduced to an embarrassment. Clarissa, that's enough, Dad said. Not with actual reprimand, but with a tone that suggested Clarissa had simply stated an inconvenient truth too loudly. Mom cleared her throat. Her voice was soft, but it carried an undeniable weight. Elara, darling, you need to be practical. Your father is simply looking out for your best interests. This allows you to move on. Perhaps find something more suitable. Something that aligns with the family's expectations. She smiled. A brittle, distant smile that didn't reach her eyes. My hands clenched under the table. They were selling my life's work. My years of tireless effort. Countless sleepless nights. Moments of pure exhilaration when a line of code finally compiled or an experiment yielded unexpected results. All of it dismissed as a project. Sold for scraps. I wanted to scream. I wanted to throw my plate across the room. I wanted to shout about the complex algorithms, the custom-built hardware, the countless failures that eventually led to tiny, exhilarating successes. But the words caught in my throat. They always did in that house. My voice in that room felt like a whisper against a hurricane. All I could do was clutch my laptop bag. Its familiar weight felt heavier now, like a stone. It held everything. Everything they were so casually selling off. Years of my life. My intellectual property. My very identity. All bundled up and dismissed like a failed hobby. The elegant dining room, usually a symbol of their success, suddenly felt like a cage. And I, the trapped bird, watched as they carved up my dreams, piece by piece between courses. A cold knot tightened in my stomach. $2 million. The number echoed in my head. A mocking whisper. It wasn't about the money for me. Not really. It was about the dismissal. The utter disregard for the 5 years I had poured into that basement lab. Each line of code, each diagram, each failed experiment and subsequent breakthrough. It was all part of me. Dad, you can't. My voice came out choked, barely a whisper. I tried to push down the rising panic to find the logical words. The scientific explanation that would make them understand the true value. The potential. This isn't just a project. This is quantum stability. It's foundational. It could revolutionize everything. He didn't even look up from his plate. He neatly sliced a piece of lamb. "Elara," he said, his tone utterly devoid of emotion. "We've had this conversation. Promising isn't profitable. We invested a significant sum into your endeavors. It hasn't yielded returns. Global Tech is offering to recoup some of that. It's a sound business decision. But it's about to yield returns," I pleaded, my voice growing stronger. Desperation coloring my words. The simulations are nearly perfect. I'm on the verge of a breakthrough in practical applications. Real-world stable quantum entanglement for data storage and processing. This isn't just theory anymore. Clarissa scoffed, dabbing her lips delicately with a linen napkin. "Oh, Elara. Always on the verge of something. We make money. We build empires. You play in the dark with your wires and your theories. It's not the same." She glanced at Mom, who offered a sympathetic but firm nod in return. It was a silent pact between them. A united front against my inconvenient existence. "And what about my name?" I asked, my voice trembling. "Now my intellectual property. My patents?" Dad finally looked at me, his eyes sharp and unyielding. "Vance Industries owns the intellectual property created on its premises, using its resources. You signed the agreement when you moved into the basement lab. Standard employment contract. Even if you weren't technically employed in the traditional sense. It covers all research undertaken during your residence here." My blood ran cold. The agreement? Of course. I had vaguely remembered signing a stack of papers when I first set up the lab. Eager to get started. Blinded by the chance to have my own dedicated space. I hadn't read the fine print. I had trusted them. Foolish. Always foolish when it came to them. He pushed a stack of documents across the table towards me. They were transfer documents. Legal language dense and intimidating. Sign these. Elara. Global tech needs the formal transfer of rights. It's a formality. He offered me a silver pen, gleaming under the chandelier. My hand shook as I reached for it. It felt like I was signing away my soul. Every molecule in my body screamed in protest. How could they do this? How could they so casually discard years of my life? Years of dedication for a paltry sum that meant nothing to them. But everything to me? Clarissa actually chuckled. Or at least get a decent job. One that pays more than and did. What was it? $100,000 a year for Vance Industries? Oh. Wait. You were never officially on payroll. Were you? Just a very expensive hobby project they indulged. The sting of her words was like a physical blow. I was invisible to them. A burden. A peculiar eccentricity they tolerated until it became inconvenient. My dreams were a joke. My intelligence. A source of amusement. My eyes burned with unshed tears. But I refused to let them fall. Not here. Not in front of them. I picked up the pen. My hand was shaking so badly that the signature looked like a child's scrawl. It felt like an act of self-mutilation. As I pushed the documents back to Dad, the rest of the family continued their dinner, their conversation flowing around me like I was a piece of furniture. They talked about a new acquisition, a potential merger, the upcoming charity gala. My humiliation was complete. I was just a minor inconvenience. Dealt with. Dismissed. Dad took the signed papers. A faint, satisfied smile playing on his lips. He slipped them into a folder. Excellent. That's settled then. He clapped his hands once. A finality to the gesture. Now, who would like more creme brulee? The family chuckled at his joke. Their laughter, light and carefree. They didn't see me. They never had. I felt utterly alone, completely invisible in my own home. My heart a raw, bleeding wound. All I could do was clutch my laptop bag tighter. The only thing left that still felt like mine. And in that moment, a quiet, cold resolve began to form in the deepest part of my broken spirit. They thought they had taken everything. They were wrong. The clatter of the creme brulee spoons against the ceramic dishes was the only sound I registered. My ears felt muffled as if submerged under water. Their laughter. Their casual conversation. It all felt distant, like echoes from another room. I sat there, my body rigid, my mind a storm of humiliation and grief. The signature on those papers felt like a brand seared onto my soul. I had just signed away 5 years of my life, my passion, my future, for a sum they considered negligible. My eyes drifted to the window. The last vestiges of twilight were fading, replaced by the inky blackness of night. The garden outside was silent, serene. I wished I could vanish into it, disappear from this glittering, suffocating room. I felt a sudden, familiar vibration against my thigh. My phone. It was in the pocket of my dress. I almost ignored it. What could possibly matter now? What could interrupt this perfectly orchestrated ritual of my family's disdain? but the vibration was insistent. Not a single buzz, but a rapid, almost frantic series of pulses. 3 distinct vibrations, one after another, each one more urgent than the last. My hand instinctively went to my pocket, pulling out my phone. The screen lit up. A sudden burst of blue light in the dimness of the formal dining room. 3 urgent emails. My breath hitched. I blinked, trying to clear the haze from my vision. The first email, bold and unread, was from the U.S. Patent and Trademark Office. The sender address was official, unmistakable. My fingers still trembling from signing the transfer documents, slowly tapped on the notification. The subject line was concise, professional, yet utterly earth-shattering. Patent application, USPTO, 2023, QUA 00007, Vance. Elara. Status, approved. My eyes widened. Approved. After months of back and forth of detailed submissions of legal wrangling with Vance Industries' own legal team, who had tried to claim ownership from the outset, it was finally unequivocally approved. A wave of dizziness washed over me. I had done it. I had fought them secretly, quietly through the labyrinthine patent system, and I had won. Before I could even fully process the first email, the second notification flashed across the screen. Another email. Same sender. This time, the subject line was even more astonishing. Urgent, breakthrough designation, granted. Quantum Stability Protocol, QSP 00001. A breakthrough designation. That wasn't just a patent. That was a rare, coveted status awarded to technologies deemed to have profound and immediate impact on science, industry, or national security. It meant expedited review, priority access to resources, and most importantly, recognition on a scale I had only dreamed of. It meant my work wasn't just scientifically sound. It was game-changing. It was revolutionary. My heart was no longer hammering. It was soaring. A wild bird suddenly unleashed from its cage. But the third email, that was the one that truly stopped my breath. It popped up just as I was rereading the breakthrough designation. A final stunning blow to the carefully constructed narrative of my family's disdain. Confidential, Quantum Stability Protocol QSP 00001. Urgent investor interest. Bidding commences at $3.7 billion USD. My vision blurred for a moment. Billion. Not million. Not the paltry 2 million Dad had just announced. Not a few million. $3.7 billion. The number screamed in my mind. A siren call in the silent chaos of my thoughts. Billion. It was an astronomical figure beyond anything I could have conceived. Even in my most ambitious dreams. It wasn't just a number. It was validation. It was vindication. It was the universe itself. It felt like shouting back at my family, correcting their narrative. My breath caught in my throat. I squeezed my eyes shut for a second, then opened them, rereading the subject line, convinced I was hallucinating. But the words remained stark and undeniable on the glowing screen. 3.7 billion. My research. My basement project. My embarrassment. The realization hit me with the force of a physical blow. Yet, it wasn't painful. It was exhilarating. They had just forced me to sign away my work for scraps. Convinced it was worthless. Convinced I was worthless. But the world, the real world, the scientific and financial world thought otherwise. They thought it was worth a fortune. My entire body felt a jolt of pure incandescent power. The quiet, cold resolve that had formed moments ago hardened into something unbreakable. They had made their move. Now it was my turn. The dessert plates had been cleared. The scent of coffee filled the room. A warm, comforting aroma that starkly contrasted with the icy atmosphere around me. My family was discussing Clarissa's upcoming trip to Paris, a fashion buying spree for her boutique. Their voices, once distant, now seemed shrill, meaningless. I took a deep breath, trying to steady my racing heart. The phone in my hand felt heavy, vibrating with the untold power contained within its screen. I had just signed away my life's work under duress. My hands shaking, my spirit crushed. But now I had something they hadn't accounted for. Something they couldn't possibly have imagined. With a deliberate, slow movement, I placed my phone on the polished mahogany table. It landed with a soft click, the screen still glowing, displaying the last, most astonishing email. $3.7 billion USD. I made sure it was angled so everyone could see it without appearing to force it. Just a casual placement. The conversation about Parisian boutiques faltered. Clarissa, mid-sentence about a new designer, paused, her eyes drawn to the luminous screen. Mom, reaching for her coffee cup, hesitated, her gaze also fixed on the phone. Dad, ever the last to acknowledge anything that wasn't directly in his line of sight, finally looked down. He saw the subject line. His eyes, usually so composed, widened almost imperceptibly. A flicker of something. Confusion. Disbelief. Crossed his face. I spoke. My voice surprisingly calm. Steady. And clear. It was a voice they rarely heard from me, usually muffled by insecurity or deference. Tonight, it carried a new quiet authority. Interesting timing. Dad, I said, looking directly at him for the first time that evening. My gaze didn't waver. The U.S. Patent Office doesn't seem to think my work is worthless after all. The room froze. It was as if someone had pressed pause on their lives. Clarissa's perfectly manicured hand halfway to her coffee cup stopped dead. Her mouth, which had been opened to add another trivial comment, snapped shut. Her eyes, usually full of mocking amusement, were now wide with an uncharacteristic, fearful uncertainty. Mom's wine glass, which she had been gently swirling, shook. A tiny ripple spread across the surface of the dark liquid, almost overflowing. She put it down abruptly. Her eyes locked on my phone, then on my face. Her serene mask had cracked. Dad's reaction was the most telling. He had been about to pick up his pen, perhaps to jot down a mental note, or simply to appear busy. But as my words hung in the air, echoing the subject line on my phone, his hand faltered. The silver pen slipped from his grasp, clattering loudly against the table. It rolled, then fell to the thick Persian rug with a soft thud. He didn't even bend to pick it up. His face, usually a picture of corporate composure, was now pale, almost ashen. The confident smirk he had worn moments ago after I signed away my research was completely gone. His eyes, full of a dawning horror, darted from my phone to my face. He opened his mouth, but no words came out. He looked like a fish out of water, gasping for air. Actually, I continued, my voice still even, but with an underlying steel they had never heard before. I registered everything under my own trust fund, not Vance Industries. The silence that followed was deafening. It was a silence born of shock, disbelief, and a profound dawning terror. Their faces, usually so expressive in their disdain, were now blank, uncomprehending. They had assumed. They had always assumed. They had assumed I was naive, that I was easily manipulated, that I would never think to protect myself from them. The silence stretched thick and suffocating. They were trying to process it, to reconcile their dismissal of me with the stark reality of the glowing phone screen. I watched their faces, the dawning horror, the creeping dread. And for the first time in my life, in that house, I felt truly seen and truly powerful. The silence in the dining room was so profound, you could practically hear the gears grinding in their minds. Dad's face was a masterpiece of disbelief, a slow dawning of realization, painting over his usual arrogance. Clarissa looked like someone had just told her her favorite designer had declared bankruptcy. Mom's composure had completely shattered, replaced by a wide-eyed, almost fearful stare. I didn't rush. I let the weight of my words settle. Let the shock permeate every corner of their carefully constructed world. Then, with a slow, deliberate movement, I reached into my laptop bag. My hands no longer trembled. They were steady, purposeful. I pulled out my tablet, its sleek surface cool against my fingertips. I tapped a few commands, bringing up a sophisticated holographic projection. It shimmered to life above the table, casting a soft blue glow. It wasn't just a static image. It was a dynamic, moving simulation. Lines of complex code, intricate molecular structures, and pulsing energy fields danced in the air, illustrating the quantum stability protocol in full. Stunning detail. This wasn't some basement hobbyist's crude prototype. This was the real deal. These are the true simulations, I stated, my voice devoid of any emotional tremor. Quantum stability achieved not just in theory, but with repeatable, verifiable results. The energy fluctuations are negligible. The entanglement sustained across significant distances, and the data transfer rates are unprecedented. Clarissa, finding her voice sputtered. That's impossible, You've been down there for years tinkering with nothing, Dad said himself. It was going nowhere. She glared at Dad as if accusing him of a personal betrayal. I allowed myself a small, tight smirk. It wasn't triumphant. Not yet. It was something colder, more satisfying. You should know about decoys, Clarissa. I learned from you. Her eyes narrowed. She had no idea what I was talking about. But I did. For years, I had watched her play her social games, her corporate maneuvers, presenting a carefully curated image while subtly undermining rivals. It taught me the art of misdirection, of allowing others to believe what they wanted to believe while the real work happened out of sight. I had carefully shown them enough, but never everything. I had led them to believe my project was perpetually on the verge, always needing more time, more investment, just enough to keep them from pulling the plug entirely, but never enough to make them scrutinize it too closely. They were content to write it off as an eccentric hobby. You see, I continued, gesturing to the shimmering holographic display. What you thought was my research was only the most basic introductory phase. The public-facing, low-stakes patent I deliberately filed months ago under Vance Industries just to appease Dad and keep the wolves from the door. Their faces were a mixture of growing horror and incomprehension. But what you didn't know? What no one knew except my patent lawyer and my team, I added, allowing the word team to hang in the air. Another secret. Another layer of my independent operation is that there isn't just one patent. I swiped on my tablet. The holographic display shifted, showing a grid of intricate designs, each clearly labeled with a patent number. There are 12 distinct interdependent patents. I paused, letting them take it in. 12, for each one, they had dismissed. There were 11 more hidden in plain sight, protected by legal firewalls they couldn't even fathom. The first, I explained, pointing to a shimmering blueprint, is for core quantum computing architecture, vastly superior to anything currently proposed. The second, a novel encryption protocol that makes current cybersecurity obsolete. The third, an entirely new method for ultra-dense, stable, quantum data storage. I listed them calmly, methodically. Each patent a nail in the coffin of their carefully constructed narrative about my worthlessness. Then there's quantum energy harvesting, atmospheric carbon sequestration, advanced medical diagnostics based on quantum resonance, and so on. My voice was steady, each word hitting its mark. The $3.7 billion offer from Global Tech was just for the first, most basic patent, the one they thought they were buying from Vance Industries. I let the full implications sink in. The total value, I concluded, looking directly into Dad's stunned eyes, for all 12 patents integrated into a fully operational system with multiple immediate real-world applications, is estimated at $15 billion minimum. And that's just the initial valuation. The silence that followed was different now. It was no longer just shock. It was a silence of utter devastation. Their world had just been irrevocably shattered. The daughter they had mocked, the one they had dismissed as an embarrassment, had just revealed herself as a titan. And she held all the cards. The $15 billion valuation hung in the air. A colossal, invisible weight pressing down on everyone in the room. Dad looked like a man who had just seen a ghost. Or perhaps a significant portion of his net worth evaporate. Clarissa's face was a mask of furious, disbelieving rage. Her perfectly composed features twisting into something ugly. Mom, for once, had no words. No placid smile to offer. I didn't gloat. There was no satisfaction in it. Not really. Only a cold, hard clarity. They had taught me this game after all. They had taught me about contracts, about clauses, about silent power plays. Dad, I began, my voice still even, but now with an undeniable edge of authority. Do you recall the board contract clause you insisted I sign when I received those initial seed funds for my project? He blinked, confusion warring with the terror in his eyes. The standard clause. Elara Vance Industries maintains oversight on all projects receiving company funds, even independent ones, he stammered, trying to regain some semblance of control. Precisely, I affirmed, and specifically the clause that states, in the event of extraordinary independent intellectual property valuation exceeding 0% of initial investment, the primary researcher, if a direct lineal descendant of the founder, shall be granted preferential option to acquire majority voting shares at current market value to safeguard the intellectual property within the family's direct control. You inserted that clause yourself, Dad, to protect against external hostile takeovers if a junior researcher stumbled onto something big. His face paled further. The blood seemed to drain from it entirely. He had put that clause in a safeguard for his legacy, his company, never imagining it would be used against him by the very daughter he considered insignificant. He had designed the cage, and I had simply found the key within its own intricate lock. Effective immediately, I continued, my gaze sweeping over each of their stunned faces. My acquisition of those shares, funded by the initial $3.7 billion from Global Tech, which as a sole patent owner, I am free to leverage as I see fit, makes me the controlling shareholder of Vance Industries. A gasp escaped Mom's lips. Clarissa choked on nothing, her face contorting in pure disbelief. This means, I clarified, letting the full impact of my words land, I am now the CEO and the chairman of the board. Just then, two impeccably dressed security officers, men I had never seen before in our home, stepped quietly into the dining room. They were not the usual Vance Industries security. These were different, stern, professional, their eyes scanning the room with calm efficiency. Clarissa, I said, turning my gaze to my sister, who was now openly trembling with a mixture of fear and fury. Your position at Vance Industries and your board seat are terminated. Effective immediately. Her mouth opened to protest, but no words came out. The security officers moved swiftly, flanking her. Furthermore, I added, I've arranged for the FBI fraud investigators to meet you downstairs for your rather inventive accounting practices in the luxury goods division. I've had a forensic audit conducted over the past few months. Your decoys, as you called them, weren't quite as clever as you thought. Clarissa gasped, her eyes widening in genuine terror. You as can. You wouldn't, she shrieked. But her voice was weak. Pathetic. Oh, but I would. Clarissa, I replied, my voice calm. You taught me well. Deception has consequences. The security officers gently but firmly guided her out of the dining room. She stumbled, casting one last venomous look at me before she was gone, her indignant cries fading down the hallway. Then I turned back to Dad. He sat slumped in his chair, a defeated man. His empire built on ambition and ruthless efficiency was crumbling around him, brought down by the very person he had tried to exploit. Dad, I said, my voice softer now, but no less firm. Your decades of service to Vance Industries are noted. You have until tomorrow morning to prepare your retirement speech. It will be a dignified send-off. A golden parachute will be provided, ensuring your comfort. He didn't argue. He didn't fight back. He simply stared. A broken man. The color had drained from his face entirely, leaving it a mask of pale shock. He was forced to prepare his own retirement speech, orchestrated by the daughter he had tried to sell off for scraps. The power in the room had utterly, irrevocably shifted. The next day, the Vance Industries boardroom felt entirely different. The polished mahogany table was the same. The panoramic view of the city skyline through the floor-to-ceiling windows identical. But the atmosphere was electric. Gone were the hushed differential tones that usually accompanied Dad's meetings. In their place was a hum of anticipation, a nervous energy from the remaining board members, most of whom had looked at me with thinly veiled disdain just yesterday. I sat at the head of the table in Dad's old chair. It felt right. My black dress, the same one from the dinner, suddenly felt like a uniform of power. My laptop bag was still beside me, but now it felt like a repository of possibility, not a shield. Good morning, I began, my voice clear and confident. I didn't raise it, didn't try to project. I just spoke and everyone listened. Thank you for attending this emergency board meeting. As of this morning, all necessary legal transfers are complete. I am officially your new CEO and chairman of the board. A few nervous coughs were heard. One older board member, Mr. Harrington, who had always seemed to dismiss my very presence, nervously adjusted his tie. Mom was not present. She had called earlier a tearful, rambling apology. But I had, politely, firmly told her that this was a business meeting. Let's address the elephant in the room, I continued. The market reacted quite enthusiastically to the news of the global tech acquisition, and then even more so to the announcement of my controlling shares and the true valuation of my intellectual property. I gestured to the large screen at the front of the room. Stock charts flashed across it, showing Vance Industries' stock price skyrocketing. It was a dizzying, almost vertical climb. Billions added to the company's market cap in less than 24 hours. The numbers were undeniable. This is just the beginning. I stated, my eyes sweeping over the faces of the board members. For too long, Vance Industries has been content to rest on past laurels, making incremental gains. We've become stagnant, predictable. That ends today. I brought up a new image on the screen, a sleek architectural rendering. It showed a massive, futuristic underground complex. This, I announced, is Project Phoenix, a secret state-of-the-art quantum research and development facility. It's been under construction for the past 3 years, funded entirely by my trust, independently of Vance Industries, but designed with the explicit intent of being integrated into the company's future when the time was right. Gasps rippled through the room. A secret facility under their noses. It was unthinkable. Project Phoenix is now operational. I confirmed, and it will be the heart of the new Vance Industries. It represents a paradigm shift not just for this company, but for global technology. Next, I brought up a list of names and titles. I'm also pleased to announce some new leadership appointments. Many of you know Dr. Evelyn Shaw, Dr. Ben Cole, and Dr. Anna Kaur. Their faces appeared on the screen. Brilliant scientists, many of whom had been unceremoniously fired by Dad over the years for pursuing unprofitable or too theoretical research. They will be returning to Vance Industries, not as researchers, but as the new heads of our quantum computing, AI development, and bioquantum engineering departments, respectively. Their teams are already in place at Project Phoenix. A wave of relief and quiet murmurs of approval went through the room from the few board members who recognized the true talent in those names. These were not just brilliant minds. They were pioneers. Now, let me show you what we've really been working on, I said. And the screen shifted again. The first image was a complex, beautiful three-dimensional map of a cancer protein, rendered with astonishing detail and precision, showing every atom, every bond. Project Phoenix's quantum processors can map complex protein structures at a resolution and speed previously thought impossible. This has immediate applications in drug discovery and personalized medicine. We're already collaborating with leading research hospitals, and the preliminary results are incredibly promising for targeted therapies. Next, a serene image of a massive industrial complex. But instead of smokestacks, it showed elegant crystalline towers glowing with a soft green light. Quantum carbon capture. Our prototypes are demonstrating an efficiency rate that could effectively reverse atmospheric carbon accumulation within decades, not centuries. This isn't just about profit. It's about global responsibility. Finally, a complex, almost artistic display of interwoven fluctuating energy fields. And of course, military-grade quantum encryption and communication. We've developed a protocol that is truly unhackable, even by future quantum computers. We are already in advanced discussions with several national defense agencies. I let the information sink in. The scale of it, the impact of it was immense. These weren't just theories. These were tangible, world-changing breakthroughs, all coming from the basement projects they had scoffed at. This is the new Vance Industries, I concluded, looking at each board member, my gaze firm and unwavering. A leader in true innovation driven by cutting-edge science and a commitment to global progress. This company will no longer be about incremental gains or short-sighted profits. It will be about building a better future. The applause, hesitant at first, grew into a resounding ovation. The boardroom, once a place of stifling tradition, now felt alive with possibility. The power shift was complete, and the revolution had begun. Weeks later, the dust was still settling. Vance Industries was abuzz with a new energy. The old guard, the ones loyal to Dad's outdated vision, had either retired gracefully or been respectfully shown the door. The new hires, brilliant minds from across the globe, flocked to Project Phoenix, eager to be part of something truly revolutionary. The stock continued to climb, fueled by one groundbreaking announcement after another. My days were a whirlwind of meetings, scientific reviews, and strategic planning. The exhaustion was immense, but it was a fulfilling kind of exhaustion born of purpose, not despair. I thrived on the intellectual challenge, on leading a team of minds as passionate as my own. One quiet afternoon, an assistant informed me that my mother was waiting in my outer office. My heart tightened. I hadn't seen her since that fateful dinner. Beyond her tearful phone call, I braced myself. She walked in tentatively. A small, almost fragile woman I barely recognized. The usual impeccable makeup was minimal, her perfect hair slightly disheveled. She clutched a worn, faded folder to her chest. "Elara," she began, her voice soft, hesitant. May I sit?" I nodded, gesturing to the chair opposite my desk. She sat, her gaze fixed on the folder, avoiding my eyes. The silence stretched between us, thick with years of unspoken words, of hurt and misunderstanding. Finally, she took a shaky breath and opened the folder. Inside were my childhood drawings, crude, colorful scribbles from years ago. A lopsided house, a stick figure family, and then drawings of fantastical machines, spaceships, elaborate circuit boards I'd imagined as a child. I remembered drawing them, showing them to her, full of youthful pride. She'd always just smiled vaguely, then tucked them away. She held up one drawing, a picture of a little girl with wild curly hair, surrounded by stars and equations. It was me. She pointed to a faded inscription in the corner, written in my childish hand. "Elara will change the world." Tears welled in her eyes, finally spilling down her cheeks. "Your grandfather would have been so proud," she whispered, her voice cracking. "He always saw it in you. The spark, the brilliance. He told me to cherish it, to protect it." She finally looked at me, her eyes red-rimmed and full of a regret I had never seen before. I failed him. And I failed you. "Elara?" The words hit me with a surprising force. All the years of neglect, the coldness, the constant dismissal. It wasn't just my pain. It was hers, too. Perhaps her failure to protect me, to see me, because she was so entrenched in Dad's world, in his expectations. I could have been cruel. I could have thrown her words back at her, listed every slight, every moment of emotional abandonment. The years of feeling like an outsider, a disappointment. But as I looked at her, truly looked at her, I saw not the cold, unyielding mother who had stood by while my dreams were sold, but a woman finally broken open, finally seeing the truth. And in that moment, a surprising wave of something akin to pity, and perhaps even a flicker of understanding washed over me. Revenge, I realized, was empty. It left a hollow space where true connection could have been. "Mom?" I said, my voice softer than I intended. "The past has passed." She flinched, as if expecting anger. "Condemnation. The question is," I continued, leaning forward slightly, "what will you build now?" Her eyes, still wet with tears, widened in surprise. "Build? Yes," I confirmed. "You always had a talent for organization, for philanthropy. The Vance Family Foundation has been stagnant, a vehicle for tax breaks mostly. I want to change that." I slid a proposal across the table. It was for a complete overhaul of the foundation, transforming it into a vibrant, active organization dedicated to funding young, unconventional scientists, especially those working on high-risk, high-reward projects that might be dismissed by traditional institutions. A foundation that would seek out the basement projects of the future. "I'm offering you a role." "Mom," I said, looking into her eyes. "Restructure the foundation. Lead it. Use your skills, your network for something truly meaningful. Something that would make Grandpa proud. Something that would nurture the next generation of innovators instead of stifling them." She stared at the proposal, then back at me. Her hand trembled as she reached out and touched the paper as if it were something precious and fragile. A flicker of hope, something I hadn't seen in her eyes in years, began to shine through the tears. It wasn't forgiveness in the sense of forgetting. The hurt was still there, a faint scar, but it was a release, a way to move forward, not just for me, but for her, for the possibility of a different kind of future for our fractured family. It was poetic justice, not in their downfall, but in my own quiet power to rebuild, to create, and to extend a hand of purpose where once there had only been neglect. They called me worthless. They called my dreams an embarrassment. For years, I believed them. I let their dismissive words echo in the quiet of my basement lab, letting them fuel my doubt, even as they fueled my determination. They thought they could sell my passion, my future for scraps. They were wrong. Now my work is not just changing a company. It's changing the world. From mapping cancer proteins with unprecedented accuracy to creating technologies that could reverse climate change to developing unhackable encryption for global security. It all started in that mocked basement with a quiet persistence they mistook for weakness. Never let anyone sell your dreams cheap. Never let their small-mindedness define your worth. Quiet persistence. Unwavering belief in your vision. and a little bit of strategic planning that builds revolutions. It builds empires of innovation. And sometimes it leads to a moment of quiet power that reshapes everything. If this story touched you, if it resonated with that fire inside you, please consider subscribing and sharing this video. It really helps the channel grow and allows me to bring you more stories of quiet rebellion and undeniable triumph. And I'd love to know in the comments, what would you have done at that dinner?